I've got two. Let me share my screen. The first of which is something that we saw on one of our customers, and it was it basically a corner of the planner where we were doing something that we wanted to be able to do, but were unable to actually do in certain dialects. So in this particular case, it was a Omni offset, which is not currently supported in SQL. In Snowflake SQL. So what we would have to do is issue a sort of two queries in order, or rather a query and then requery that result in order to do that, which is a much more complicated plan to execute. It's sort of the first place where we have sort of a multi-stage plan. So I can come in here and add a field. And for this, I'm just going to grab it since I'm typing it. Um, Users, you can see here, actually click the add button. Um, SQL got a little more complicated. Not exactly sure what happened there, but the Omni offset is in here. It is now taking the offset from the previous row, or I guess the previous pivot. And if we take a look, there's this step one that says run on Snowflake. That result gets pulled in, run on DuckDB. We then do the partition by, and we start doing the minimum over and then do the range basically to do that offset so that we can subtract the two and get that value. And while it sort of is allowing for sort of us to be more flexible in what kinds of queries we can support and the calculations that we can support on top of a result set, which will be important for things like, I mean, it will be important for calcs in general, but it also sort of opens the door for more complicated queries. So things like a merge query, things like taking a result set from a CSV and requerying it and things like that, joining it in, et cetera. And just sort of begins to open up that conversation a little bit more. Um, this is basically all happening in the server side requery. There's no reason, except for it's not implemented yet, why it couldn't happen on the front end side of requerying. We would just send the original result set down to the client, and then the client can do that requery. So it's really not too different there, but it's just an optimization that we could make in the future. Second is I got a lot of folks asking, I think because a prospect or a client was interested in query downloads. So I was just poking around. I was unsuccessful in making this actually look at all nice, but doing things like downloading a query, adding a limit, and going and downloading it. It's actually going to take quite a while for a variety of reasons. One of which is that we're not streaming data through any of these systems, so it's or not streaming it through the remix layer yet. So it's doing all of that. I may have actually crashed my browser in this case. So a couple of, or crashed the remix layer. So there's a couple of things where sort of having to continue to do some work here. But it's not huge. Definitely something that want to be able to make significantly better in the future. So this is probably going to take a little while before this functionality is fully out there. But just sort of getting the pieces rolling so that we could have changing limits and having limits work with SQL queries and whatnot so that we can successfully download some of these larger result sets and build on top of the work that I was working on last week, which is being able to store these larger result sets while we're passing them around and doing all of that. But obviously, there's a little bit more work that needs to happen in order to make this real.
Johnny, is that intended to be a replacement for the existing download CSV button?
You know, I was going to stick it behind a feature flag or not even merge it yet until we've kind of gone a little bit further. I was mostly looking at the sort of what is needed to support this sort of at all layers and what does it look like. In particular, what we're currently doing is we're taking the entire result set, downloading it, shoving it into the sort of remix layer, turning that into a CSV and sending that down, which is fine for smaller result sets, but it would be great if we could process it sort of on a row by row basis. For the UI, it was mostly just what can I do to stick something in there that potentially worked.
Right, but so this is roughly the same functionality as the existing download CSV with some additional features like setting a different limit, but implemented in a much more scalable way.
Yeah, basically. I mean, it needs to be implemented in a much more scalable way, and it's not fully yet, but the sort of deep query processing parts